Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Inside Gaming review. Today we got a little special one for you. We're reviewing the Google Stadia, and just to set the stage real quick, this is a kind of a quick dive in. We didn't want to do a review in progress, but we should note off the top that this thing's gonna change over time. I mean, it's just launched and it will improve, but for right now, for those of you that want to know should you jump in and get this, we wanted to do the kind of state of Stadia as it is right now, so here's kind of what we think. So first of all, what is Google Stadia if you're unaware? Well, it's a streaming service. It's a way for you to stream games in high quality to whatever device that you want to, with some caveats. The problem right now is, and I will be honest with you off the top, I really can't recommend this as it is right now. So it's $130 with 3 months of premium service. So it's already a pretty steep price of entry just for what you're getting. And it's also gonna be $10 a month after that 3 months of initial service. And what's weird about that is that you're actually paying 3 separate things just to be able to use the damn thing. So you've got the $130 for the initial bundle, then you've got the $10 a month for premium service, plus the cost of games. So we said on Inside Gaming Daily a little bit about this already. We do think that as a channel, this is probably the best option for cloud gaming right now. As we mentioned though, that's really not a huge distinction. The bar is fairly low at this point. So like kind of being the coolest kid in the chess club. Their competitors for Stadia are closing in. We've got services like Shadow, which is honestly a more impressive service. It's just not as packaged as well, and it's not as easy and, you know, turnkey out of the box. But you know, services like xCloud are coming, and even Amazon, as we just learned, is going to be rolling out their own streaming service. So, I mean, unless you're like the really early adopter type, I can't recommend jumping into it as of right now. Right now, it just feels like a really overpriced beta. Even that whole idea of being able to use it on whatever device you want isn't fully realized right now. For instance, for phones, that's one of the big promises of Stadia is, you know, you attach a phone to your controller and you can start playing on the go. Well, that's not the case for every phone yet. In fact, like no iPhones. In fact, most Androids don't even run it yet. You have to have not only a Pixel, but a specific set of Pixel phones. There's about 4 last time I checked that can actually run Stadia at this point. Just off the top, I do want to get it clear, there's really no need to buy Stadia at this point, maybe down the line. Right now, you're just paying way too much money for 3 barely functioning arms of the same sickly octopus. The hardware, the service, and the actual games, they're all async on your wallet, and I really don't think it's worth it right now. So if that's all you came here for, well, then have a good weekend. Otherwise, stick around, we'll get a little bit more in depth onto this thing. All right, so in the box here, for this $130, first thing you see, you're getting your controller. Now the controller itself is actually quite good. It only works wirelessly with Chromecast, otherwise you have to plug it in. So if you're playing it off of like a computer or your phone on a clip, it does have to be plugged into that USB-C, but the controller itself is actually pretty nice. It's kind of a mix between an Xbox controller and a PlayStation controller, whereas the button layout is obviously similar to a DualShock. It's got that kind of chunky meatiness that's kind of satisfying of an Xbox One controller. The actual triggers they're springy and nice like you'd have with any modern controller. They're a little flat for my taste. You've got these kind of clicky shoulder buttons. It's really nothing that you haven't seen before in a decent controller. The weird thing right now is that there's essentially 2 functionless buttons on this thing. And that's the Google Assistant button, which as of right now doesn't really do much of anything, and then the screenshot button, which can take a screenshot in certain games, but I've noticed it being a little wonky as far as actually connecting and then saving that screenshot, and it's not like it's a hub for different capture options. It's just that one snapshot as far as I can tell right now. And the cool thing about Stadia is that there's really not much to unpackage here. You just kind of use the controller if you want to play the games that you're connecting to, and then otherwise you just need a way to connect. So if you're doing it off of a TV, for instance, you need to use the Chromecast Ultra, and that just plugs into your TV like any normal Chromecast, connect it to the controller, and you're off. But if you're playing it on something like, a laptop, or you're playing it on just anything with a already built-in internet connection, then you don't even need that. You just can use the controller, or whatever controller you want to. That is a pretty cool bit of flexibility with Stadia as it stands right now. Otherwise, you just got your normal cables and chargers and all that good stuff. I do appreciate that the power that goes into connected to your TV has an Ethernet port actually in the power supply, so that's really nice. So one thing that you pretty noticeably don't get in the box is that phone clip. That was one of the big promises of Stadia's being an on-the-go alternative, and as it stands right now, you actually have to buy that separate, which is kind of annoying, but knowing that you can only have a very select amount of phones that actually work with Stadia, it's maybe not the biggest deal that it's not included. So the big promise of Stadia is all hinged upon its connection and how well it works as far as the fear of input lag and how good of a performance you can get from something like this that is a streaming service. Well, obviously the internet is better when it's wired. No surprise there. I was actually getting really good performance here at the office. I would expect better though. I was getting about 500 megabits per second down, which is really good internet speed, but I was only getting like okay good performance. I mean, it was fine. The input latency wasn't too bad. I would expect better from being able to have a connection of that speed. Like I said, 500 down is quite good. It's very good. Wi-Fi, on the other hand, is really inconsistent. It ran okay, and I'm putting that nicely, when nothing too crazy was happening, but then, you know, in something like Destiny 2, just adding walking and shooting, doing a few different tasks at once, that started to really slow things down. In fact, I noticed specifically in Destiny that it was 100% playable at some times with absolutely horrific input lag being not even the worst of my problems. Like, the input lag was definitely horrific. You'll see in some of this footage that's playing right now that it is just unplayable amounts of input lag. So by far the game that I spent the most amount of time with on Stadia is Destiny 2, which is good because that is one of the free games that you can get with the service right now. And it's kind of being positioned as the flagship Stadia game. So it makes the most sense to kind of focus on that one as the point of most of these metrics that we're talking about in the review. As it stands right now, I just kind of fired up a new Destiny account, so please excuse all of this early game footage. It's really not important where in the story it is. I just kind of am running around on EDZ trying to get you examples of how the actual input lag feels and makes the game feel as you're playing it. So pardon all this early game footage. But in some cases, I couldn't even get the game to launch. It would crash before it even got out of the menus, couldn't even launch the game, couldn't get past, you know, the tower, and then trying to load into a planet or something, everything just crashed. And I should note that this is on Wi-Fi, but this is all at what I was clocking around 190 megabits per second down here in the office Wi-Fi, which is well above Google's recommended 35 megabits per second speed to run games in 4K. So if you're trying to use Stadia at the bare minimum that they recommend, 10 megabits per second, I think you're probably going to have a really bad time. So let's talk about the games next. So as we publish this video, there are 44 titles that do or will exist in the near future, and we've covered this pretty extensively on Inside Gaming Daily, but the launch lineup, just to reiterate, is not very compelling. Many of the games are older titles that are in almost every case superior on any other platform. This starts to beg the question of who is the Stadia really for? If you want to play a year-plus-old game like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, that's fine. Totally feel you. You gotta burn through that backlog eventually, but I just don't understand why you would do that on Stadia right now. I mean, there's any other option is better than doing that on Stadia. For instance, Destiny, like I was talking about. You know, I play Destiny very frequently. I play it on PS4, I play it on PC, and I can tell you from experience, playing it on Stadia is by far the worst time I've had playing the game. Even having that fantastic 500 megabits per second internet speed, still I noticed a ton of input latency. And even if it wasn't super egregious input latency, it was still there and it was noticeable. And it was something that would make playing, like I said, first-person shooters, action games, fighters, just not worth it. Another weird feature of the game's lineup right now is that you actually have to download them from a mobile app. Not quite that promised, you know, click the ad that you see and start playing the game immediately. That feature has been promised by Google, or at the very least it's been implied, but unfortunately that feature is not here yet. And it's kind of a pain in the ass to download games, which doesn't feel good when you're also having to buy them on top of that. When it comes to actually playing these games, the feeling of controlling games on Stadia, I mean, like I said, the controller is pretty good. It's a decent controller. I mean, at the end of the day, what you want your controller to do is to just, you know, melt away and you forget that it's even there, and that is something that happens with Stadia. After a few minutes of playing with it, it all felt natural and I liked it. The problem is not the controller. If that controller is setting you up for input lag, it's just not going to feel good ever. And it may be a little tough to see in some of the on-screen footage, but when you're looking at the off-screen footage, you can really see that time difference between the button press and the actual action on the screen. That is really something to look out for, and I cannot recommend it as it sits right now. So anyways, in conclusion, that's really all I have to say about the Stadia right now. Like I said, it's really not a super promising package as of right now, and that's not really what it's meant to be. I mean, it's meant right now for those early adopter types, those that really like to live on the cutting edge of technology, and they're fine with shelling out a decent chunk of change to be the first people to try this service out. And it should should be worth noting that this is a really cool thing that we have now. The fact that we are now having this active conversation about game streaming services is really cool, and clearly we're marching ever forward into the future. But granted, Stadia is only going to improve. I have to imagine that this is only the first of many iterations of Stadia if Google doesn't abandon it, which, to be fair, they have a track record of doing with other things. But if Google stays with Stadia and is able to actually turn this thing into the product that it was promised to be, well, Stadia could be a really big mover and shaker for the games industry. And not just in the way that we've talked about it with casual gaming and people that don't want to shell out for a console or a PC. I mean, this could be a really cool alternative to even, say, mobile gaming if it works and we can find places where those connections aren't as bad and don't absolutely destroy the entire process of playing the thing. In the meantime, please stay tuned to Inside Gaming for more on Google Stadia and all the other streaming services that'll be coming down the pipe soon. Other than that, thanks for watching. Have a good one.
That's a positive, but I'll continue to drag my dual monitor PC setup into the Gelsons. Camp out by the cheese section.
They give you a cart for a reason, all right?
I'm sorry, I don't need to be helped. I'm playing Doom.
I could use more mozzarella though.
Excuse me, where's your Ethernet port? DualShockers also had a good experience.